Hello, everyone. We are going live today for a very special session with my good friend, MyCancerChic, and here she is. Let's see. Anna, could you request to join? I'm not sure if I can. Oh, there we go.
Okay, I think we're on.
Hi.
Hello.
How are
How are you?
you? Good.
Doing
You look
well. I'm glad
great.
you too. I feel like we had very similar color vibes going on tonight. So
Well,
we'll go with it.
I was like just inspired by your style. Of course, getting ready to, do this interview. I did a deep dive into your blog. I've
Oh,
done it a few times before, but I was like, I need a refresher. So just seeing all your
oh,
beautiful pictures, I was like, I'm just like in an Anna vibe today. So I went with the
oh my
pink and I'm
God, I
wearing
love it.
this
I
yeah, this is gonna come out in the fall. So we're having like a few pearl styles that are gonna be out. So it's
Ooh.
something new for us. So
I
just
love
thought I'd put it
pearl
on.
styles. Yes, I love
No.
that. So I'm so excited to be here. Yes, thank you for
Likewise.
having me.
Likewise, yeah. So we're so honored to have you on. This is our first Fashion and Beauty During Hair Loss live. This is in honor of National Hair Loss Awareness Month. But like I'm sure some of you might have heard me say before, it's so much more than hair loss. At StyleEsteem, we believe that it's actually a hair journey, and there's three parts. The first part is when you're diagnosed and you find out you may need chemo, which can result in hair loss. The middle part is when you are in treatment and your hair is falling out. And then the third part is when you are in that regrowth phase of the journey. And so,
Mhm.
this is obviously a physical transformation that you go through because it changes how you get dressed and how you present yourself in the world. But it's also very much a mental transformation too, because it changes how you see yourself. And that's a big part of, how you heal. And so I love that your content has always brought those two dualities together, the mental and the physical part of healing and of feeling good about yourself. And so I'd love to hear from you, just like introduce yourself, and tell me especially about your name and the origin of your name.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, of course. And I love that you touched on, all the phases to hair loss and that process, because I think it's super important to recognize that, like you said,
Yeah.
it's not just a one-time thing and it's over and you've coped with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Anna, from the brand and blog My Cancer Chic. So if you don't know me, it's so wonderful to meet you. I was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 27 in 2015 and didn't know anybody that had had cancer at that point, particularly, when you're in your 20s. It's not something you're thinking about. I was
Yeah.
very into fashion and beauty and makeup tutorials and just all of that kind of stuff. And so the first thing I did when I was diagnosed was turn to blogs, turn to Google,
Mm.
Dr. Google, but not in a medical sense. I wanted the fashion advice. I wanted the wig advice. I wanted the
Yeah.
what do I do with my hair? How do I do my eyebrows? And I couldn't find it at the time. Instagram hadn't really taken off hugely yet in 2015, and social media was just in a very different place. And so I started my blog, My Cancer Chic, kind of as my niche to help other women that really wanted to use style and beauty and makeup and, all
Yeah.
of those pieces as part of their mental and physical recovery
Yeah.
as they were kind of going through their journey and really focus on the confidence piece, because I think for
Mm.
women, losing our hair can be
Yeah.
extremely traumatic. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a little quick about
Wow.
me section.
That's amazing. And I wanted to like dive right into the interview, but
Let's do it.
I realized like I always forget to introduce myself. I always do
Yes,
this.
please. I know you didn't even say your name.
I
Yes,
know,
so
I
you
know.
introduce you, Sonia.
So my name is Sonia. Hi to all of Anna's followers that I'm newly connecting with, and to those who are already part of our community. And I'm a young breast cancer survivor. My connection to all of this is that when I lost my hair to chemo, I couldn't find anything stylish to put on my head, stylish and comfortable for that matter. And so I ended up, creating my own turbans during my treatment, and I realized the impact that this had on me to have something so fashionable and comfortable. and how that changed my quality of life. And I really just wanted to give that to other women. So I ended up launching StyleEsteem Wardrobe, which is the first of its kind company to create turbans for women of all hair journeys, but to offer them by season and occasion. So you can shop for turbans the same way you shop for clothes. And so that's what we do alongside of our just our educative part of teaching you how to sort of, have self-care in your life, especially through the hair journey. So yes, this is very
That was a
exciting.
great
And
intro.
oh, thank you. Thank
And I
you. The
think it
elevator
is
pitch.
so important to
Yeah.
mention, like what you said, of being able to find options, because I think,
Yeah.
it's not just fair to say, oh, well, you have cancer and you have to wear
Yeah.
X. You have to wear a
Yeah.
hat. You have to wear a beanie. That's what I like went to. And
Yeah.
I mean, my cancer hospital had hats and, baskets of things you could go
Yeah.
through, but like, it's a mismatch of scarves and hats.
Yeah.
And like, you just want to have that, like, kind of special, fashionable
Yeah.
option to shop for. So I love that you guys have so many beautiful designs like this
Oh,
one that you guys
thank
sent over, and the one
you.
you're wearing. And I have
Thank
another one to
you.
grab while
Oh,
before we get into the
sure.
as we get into our chat.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I totally agree with you. I think, the fashion industry has kind of created this wall between oh, love it. It's like a perfect match with your top. Maybe
I
you
know,
can
I'm
have
like,
an
I might have
outfit
to
change at
switch.
one
I'm gonna have
point.
to have a quick outfit change. Yeah.
I love that.
Sorry, you were
Yeah.
saying the fashion world has had.
Yeah. So when I, kind of had my first moments in the cancer world, I kind of felt like all of a sudden I had this category of clothing that was created just for the cancer patient in me. And it wasn't
Mhm.
really like all that stylish. And it's not something that appealed to me then, and it wouldn't have appealed to me had I not gotten diagnosed. And I just think it's so important to have, beautiful items that are created for the person inside of you, not just where you are in your diagnosis story or your hair loss journey. I think that that's kind of the thing that we all need more of to help us feel more like ourselves, especially during a time
Yeah.
when you feel like less and less of yourself on some days. But
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
absolutely. That is a great
yeah,
way to put it.
yeah. Speaking of products, I'm curious, like, what were your favorite fashion and beauty items during
Ooh.
your hair loss? Like, what were your go-to top three things that you couldn't live without?
Yes, so I was pulling out some brow products. So I feel like I lost most of my brows. I mean, now my brows have grown back pretty
Yeah,
nicely and I had microblading done, but during chemo, I was like obsessed with brow products, like to draw on brows,
yeah,
make myself just like feel a little bit more confident, because I feel like our brows really do frame our face.
yeah,
Um, and so being able to draw on my brows with different products. Also, lipstick was huge for me, like
yeah,
really bright colors, of like being able to have like reds or hot
yeah,
pinks or different things like that. And a lot of, in terms of like my hair kind of journey,
yeah,
I didn't really get into like turbans and wraps and
yeah,
headscarves during chemo. I honestly was a little intimidated and I wasn't
yeah,
sure where to look. And like you
yeah,
said, there also weren't super cute, fashionable turbans. So I
yeah.
wore a wig for about 3 months.
Okay.
Um, and I had a couple different wigs. I had one that looked like my pre-cancer hair. And I quickly realized I did not like
Yeah,
that one because I felt like I was like trying to be someone that I wasn't.
yeah,
And then I had a couple that were different, but
yeah,
about halfway through my chemo, I one of my wigs was like being washed, and my parents had taken it to get it washed, and I just like decided to go to the grocery store bald, and that
yeah,
was like such a changing moment for me. Like I put on some big earrings, I put
yeah,
on some hot pink lipstick, and I just went to the grocery store bald, and
yeah,
I felt absolutely amazing. And so from that point on, aside from like hats to keep me warm, I really
yeah,
just wore my bald head um until my hair grew back. But like that
yeah.
makeup, the earrings, any kind of hair accessory, headbands, like wrapped kind of thing was so
Sure.
important.
So you kind of just dove right in to embracing your baldy. Is that how it happened?
I did. It was kind of
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, I'd only had been wearing it at home, but I think I got like that confidence spurt of doing
Yeah.
it once. And I'm sure you've had this experience too, and others with hair loss, that
Yeah.
people say things to you not realizing why you have hair loss. Like they'll say
Okay.
things like, wow, I really love your haircut. remember when
Yeah.
I got the buzz cut, and you're like,
Yeah.
well, it's not a haircut by
Yeah.
choice, but it is. And so I think, when you go into public and you realize like that one time, okay, my world is not going to like fall apart. Everybody's not staring at me. Like
Yeah.
it's fine. I'm confident. Like I can walk around the store. I'm still me, bald. Like I think that was just such a turning point for me that it was from there, I was then able to show up to work like that. And I was able to show
Sure.
up like in social settings. But it was nerve wracking at first. So I think somebody had commented, like, oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't have the courage.
I
Like,
was gonna
I
say,
think
do you
it's
have some words
okay.
of encouragement? Like, do you have a piece of
Yeah.
advice or mantra to remember?
I
Yeah.
think one thing that's really been resonating for me lately is this concept of like, it's okay to be scared and do it
Yeah.
anyway. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, I'm not gonna like pretend that I wasn't terrified, like walking into the grocery store that day, and
Hmm.
probably wanted to chicken out and put the hat back on, but
Yeah.
just doing it scared and saying, like, this is something I want to do. I know I want to push through this fear. It's okay. I'm safe. I'm confident and doing it, I think would be like my words of just remembering, like staying in your space, make your bubble of safety, and then
Yeah.
do those hard experiences.
Yeah, because it's something that you can own, right? And when you wear it with confidence, whatever it is, whether it's a turban or a bald head or even a wig, it's all about that sort of confidence you put forward. And like you said, when you got those different haircuts and people just kind of complimented you on the haircut, I had the same experience. I remember initially I tried wearing a wig, and I got my treatment over the course of the summer. So I started in May and I
Okay.
ended it in August, but like, and that was my first 6 rounds of chemo, not the whole year that I went through after. But I remember it was like really hot at that time. And so I really tried to
Mhm.
wear the wig as often as I could just because I was out and about. I was working in the media space, and I thought this is how I'm expected to look. But
Yeah.
as soon as I started to wear my wig, I thought people would know because it was a blonde wig. I decided to really hardcore experiment. Probably the hair that you have now is the way my
Oh
wig
my
looked. It was like
God.
a blonde bob cut, but like
I want to
it's so
see
funny
it.
because I have to send you a picture, and it's so funny because I didn't realize that my wig actually had dark roots, and so it really looked like my hair. And people started to ask me like, who's your colorist? Like, what made you change it
Oh
up so big? And I was
my
like, I have
gosh.
to come up with a story here. Like, I have to come up with a backstory for
Yes.
a bit. So, it really depends. I mean, if you just, find something that you really physically you connect with, something that makes you feel bold and strong and brings out that confidence in you, which is, I think, what fashion and beauty have the power to do now more than
Yeah.
ever. I think you would be surprised at how people would maybe do a double take for all the right reasons. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, I love that you just said, like, oh, I kind of need to come up with a backstory, like
Yeah.
acknowledging that just because people say, like, oh, it's a haircut or why
Yeah.
did you change? Like, you don't have to tell them anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of freeing. Like, no, you don't have to
Yeah.
tell them it's a wig. You don't have to tell them the situation. Like you said,
Yeah.
that is the power
Yeah.
of makeup, of fashion, of beauty to be able to
Yeah.
say, this is my story and I'm going to tell it on my terms.
I love that.
I can use this to create the image that I want to project in the world because
Yeah.
it should be on my terms when
Yeah.
and what I want to share with you. So I love that you touched on that because that's really important as you're going through
Yeah.
things.
I agree. And like for me personally, like I actually waited until my first 6 rounds of chemo were done before I was ready to talk about it. I wasn't emotionally or physically strong enough, quite frankly, to deal with having to explain myself. And so, you
Yeah.
know, being on that edge where you're feeling like your bald head or your lack of brows is going to out you as a cancer patient, I think you can find some tools and really pivot that into taking back your look and taking back your story and actually giving yourself that space if that's what you need at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. All about what you can control, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of that, so I recently learned, after many, many years of using brow products, I recently learned in a personal at-home makeover session with Lipstick Angels. They're a wonderful
Ooh,
organization.
okay.
They taught me how to map my brows. Like that's something I didn't really
Yes.
know that much about before. But like I noticed you always have really nicely sort of manicured brows. They always look very fresh and,
Oh, thank
intentional, if
you.
I can use that word.
That's a
And I love
great word
that.
for it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love
And so
that.
if you had some like tips for someone who is starting out in the brow space, because brows can
Hmm.
be intimidating, it's such a big
Oh,
part
yeah.
of your face, and like to have to recreate it is like it's a little overwhelming. So if you had some,
Yeah.
tips for someone who's starting out in that space, like what would you advise them to start
Okay,
with?
so I love that you touched on the brow mapping because
Yeah.
that was literally like when I learned that, that's when it changed my life because like I'm like mortified to look back on these pictures, but I used to like start my eyebrows like all the way over here and
Mm,
I had
okay.
plucked to there, so they were really thin. But once
Yeah.
you start to like if you have a really thin pencil or something, you can actually kind of do it. So essentially you
Okay.
just want to like go up from your nose, and that's where right here is where you're going to begin your brow. And
Okay.
then you kind of go from the middle of your nose out, and that's going to be where your arch is, and you can kind of make like a little line just to see, and then you go from the corner and you go straight up, and that's where it ends. And whenever
Okay.
I learned like that three, like map it,
Yeah.
I think then you have the framework to work within, and then you can
Okay.
decide, do I like a thicker brow, do I like a thinner brow, do I like, want more like to look like more hair stroke lines, or do I like
Yeah.
it to be more like powder? I think there's so many products on there. It can be really, really overwhelming. But
Yeah.
if you start with just the brow mapping, and then I would always recommend to people that are just starting out to go with a micro like pencil that's very, very thin. This one's
Mm,
from Fenty Beauty. The NYX one that's like $10 is
that's a great
great.
one. Yeah.
Something that's just like super thin so you have a lot more control and not super pigmented when you're
Yeah.
starting out, particularly when you are drawing them out and when you have nothing.
Yeah.
Like when you're completely bald, being able to have a lighter hand and like a
Yeah.
product that's not going to be as intense is super helpful. And
Yeah.
then another just like last little tip is
Yeah.
you can actually use a makeup brush to blend your brows. So one of the
Oh.
biggest mistakes I see is people fill in their brows and they're like very, very harsh lines.
Mm,
So if
mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
just take like after you do your makeup, if you just take your brush that has like a tiny bit of foundation or powder or product on it, and you literally just like pat right
Yeah.
here, it makes them look a lot more natural because it
Yeah.
looks like it's blending into your face like a natural
Huh.
eyebrow would. So those were a few of the things that I like had learned right
Yeah.
before chemo or like starting chemo just because I was on a brow journey.
Yeah.
um, so I
Yeah.
think those are some of the things that I would recommend just to kind of get started.
Yeah.
And also, like you said, using resources that are out there, that are available to give you makeup consultations
Yeah.
or free insight. I know I went to Sephora all the
Mm,
time just to
yeah.
get like their like, hey, my skin's changing. I suddenly have dry skin and I
Yeah.
never had dry skin before. What am I supposed to do? And getting like
Yeah.
recommendations, I think makes you feel like a little bit more supported in what you're going through.
Yeah, I agree. I love the idea of going to someone who has more of that like field of knowledge about these things, because I personally I'm not like a product expert. So for me it takes a lot of, I have to visit the topic a number of times before I can actually commit, and talking to
Yeah.
someone or consulting a blog like, someone like yourself, I think that's a big help. And so I kind of like that is more of an active space in our community now, where you can talk to each other, or you can just, as always, go to an expert. But
Yes.
I noticed in a lot of your blogs, you're sharing these experiences that you've had with like, the mental aspect of your hair journey, and coming to sort of a full circle about how you feel about it and how you feel about yourself. And I was kind of wondering, like, how did you manage to stay inspired during a time where you were going through so much? And like, what did that active effort of staying inspired have an impact on you as?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm thinking back to there was one particular period of time right after I'd lost my hair, and I was, really nervous about going to work for the first time,
Yeah.
wearing a wig, and kind of that feeling of like, I'm not me anymore. My body doesn't
Yeah.
look like the woman that I looked like a month ago. I've
Yeah.
lost my hair. Like, I just really was struggling to like find some connection with myself.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to one of my colleagues who I was really close with, and I was just telling her how nervous and like
Yeah.
worried I was about coming into work like that, coming into work, on Monday
Yeah.
without my hair. And she's like, excuse my language, she's like, who gives a fuck? She was like, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of you. She's like, I'm here. I'm one door away from you. Like, if
Yeah.
anybody says anything to
I
you,
love
I
that.
have your back. Like, just like finding your support
Yeah.
system, whether it's people that get it or not, or just being like, hey, I need you to walk into the grocery store with me because I'm really not feeling like myself and I'm not feeling really
Yeah.
confident like doing this. Just like finding small ways to
Yeah.
build your network of support and
Yeah.
recognizing that it's okay to feel those things, because
Mm.
at least for me, and I'm sure for you too, I mean, losing your hair, I think, was way more traumatic than losing my breasts. Like,
Mm.
I was fine to go through surgery. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't traumatic, but
Yeah.
in comparison, the hair loss hit me a lot harder in
Yeah.
terms of my mental state. And I think in terms of staying, positive during that, or staying like inspired, it
Yeah.
was just kind of finding small bits of every day, like we talked about at the beginning, that you can control. And for
Yeah.
me, my morning routine was that, I would wake up every day,
Oh.
I would look in the mirror, and I would feel really discouraged because I didn't
Yeah.
recognize the person in the mirror. And I would plan every morning to have like 20, 30 minutes before I went to work where I could,
Mm.
put on a full face of makeup and choose my earrings and really feel like, okay, who is the person that I'm going to create today?
Yeah.
And then feeling really good about that. And then
Yeah.
realizing like, okay, it's still me. I'm just choosing to present in this way. But
Yeah.
it's so hard when you look in the mirror and you don't recognize that person. And
Yeah.
I think it's okay for us to acknowledge that, like, we don't recognize that person and we don't
Yeah.
really resonate for that person. Somebody just shared, also gaining weight. Yeah. So you're
Yeah.
not only are you losing your hair, but you're generally gaining weight with steroids and chemotherapy. So there's so many
Yeah.
changes. And so I think recognizing what can I control, how can I surround myself
Mm.
with a support system that helps me feel really confident, really supported in who I am.
Yeah.
And then also just being self-aware and giving yourself time to reflect on what are the struggles that I'm having, and um, how do I kind of reflect on what will help me move forward through those.
I love that. I love that. And it's about sort of giving yourself a little bit of grace because like you said, some days you won't recognize yourself. Other days you'll feel like, you're getting just like dressed in the exact way that gives you that boost before you head out the door. So, it's kind of, it's taking it day by day, but sometimes like the advice that I usually give and the advice that I followed for myself was taking it hour by hour if needed. Sometimes take it minute by
Mm-hmm.
minute. Like it's okay to
Oh,
slow
yeah.
all the way down and just like give yourself again that grace to go forward in a way that's fair to you. And so as you started to go through the hair regrowth process, how did you continue to stay inspired and kind of keep that awareness about each length of hair, and just what your plan was as you would move forward into each phase?
Yeah, so I think, I see a lot of people mentioning, they're in chemo now or kind of
Yeah.
in that phase. And I think for me, all throughout chemo, I was really so focused on the end of chemo and my hair
Yeah.
growing back. So my hair was actually kind of like slightly growing back during chemo, but it was in that fuzzy kind of, I felt like I just looked sick phase. So I
Hmm.
kept buzzing it just because I thought like I felt really confident with like the clean, bald look. And so I kept buzzing it until the very end. And then I remember on the very last chemo, I asked my oncologist, I was like, okay, can I start biotin and like all the hair growth tomorrow? And so I literally started like the
Yeah.
day after chemo. I was like, okay, Operation Hair Regrowth. One of the things for me that really helped, I think, my mental state was saying, like, I'm going to approach this. as a project and in like a
Yeah.
challenge. I'm very much like a research project, Pinterest, save ideas, do stuff. And so I just started like saving all kinds of hairstyle ideas, looking at all kinds of websites for hair regrowth. And, you know, of course, there was this emotional, like, I can't wait for this to happen. But it was
Sure.
also a great way for me to kind of take that on and say, okay, here's something that I'm approaching as a challenge. Each
Yeah.
phase is going to be a new challenge for me in terms of styling. What can I learn about this new length of hair? What products work? What styles look good? You know,
Yeah.
is the texture different? And almost like approaching it as an investigation felt
Oh,
better than like, oh my God, when is my hair going to grow back? And taking a lot of
yeah.
pictures too and documenting so that I could
Mm.
see that growth. Because even at, you know, 6 weeks, I could
Yeah.
see growth. And so being able to stop and
Yeah.
celebrate and have like that moment.
Yeah.
And then I think one additional thing that helped me so much was getting um, small hair trims along the way.
Oh,
Now, I know some people feel strongly against doing this because they just want like as much length as possible.
yeah.
But for me, I learned from my hairstylist that the hair, like on the front and your sides,
Yeah.
and will take the longest to grow, but your
Okay.
back grows really fast.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to feel like at each stage of the regrowth that I liked it as a hairstyle. And so I would go
Mm.
in like every 4 to 6 weeks and get the hair around my ears trimmed and
Oh,
around the nape of my neck until the top of my hair caught up. And for
I see.
me, it just made me feel like a little more polished.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, so many of us go through that mullet phase that is just so hard to work with.
Yes.
And I mean, I learned that just that trim is the difference between a mullet phase and a more intentional haircut or hairstyle rather. So that's really, I mean, it's such a small thing, but it's such a good thing to remember, I think.
It
So
does.
I I noticed that you shared quite a bit about dressing for short hair, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that,
Oh,
and
yeah.
if you think that those same tips could work for when you're bald, when you're actually going through the hair loss itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a really interesting blog post that I did. And it kind of came out of one of my own discoveries after going through cancer. You know, I had kind of been wearing the wigs and then suddenly I started going bald. And I realized that when I would look in the mirror, just the proportions of how things were balancing out on my
Yeah.
outfit and my hair looked really different when you don't have hair. And so I was definitely finding that there were a couple of things that played into dressing and the whole look instead of just the hair or the clothes. And so for me, I definitely found that when I was wearing more baggy clothes,
Yeah.
it, like for me, that didn't look as good with the bald or shorter hair versus if I wore more form-fitting clothes, it brought a little bit more like polish and definition to my body,
Yeah.
particularly since I didn't have like the hair to kind of um again balance out. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking of that word balance.
It is a
And then
balancing act.
right, it is. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I'm also very petite. And
Yeah.
so kind of trying to think about like which styles worked well. I found that clothing that had, you know,
Mm.
accents, whether it was puff sleeves or ruffles or some kind of accent on it, also looked really good with a bald head because you kind of have this contrast of no
Yeah.
hair with either a bright, bold shirt or a bright sweater or an accent.
Yeah.
So almost thinking about how your clothes can play a complementary role to either
Yeah.
your short hair or your bald head is just another way I think to be able to kind of spin um, to just spin that into a way that feels really good, I think, for you. And earrings as well. I think this is something that comes up a lot in our cancer
Yeah.
community, but you know, earrings are a great way again to balance you
Yeah.
know, your style, headbands or any kind of like, you know, head turban, head wrap that
Yeah.
creates some kind of texture or three-dimensional
Yeah.
effect to an area that is generally quite, you know, smooth when you're bald
Yeah.
or only a little bit of hair. So yeah, I loved, you know, sharing some of those. And I think they're all all the things that I talked about, I would still probably say today as well if I,
Yeah.
kind of, if I lost my hair again. And even if you cut your hair, so at
Yeah.
all different stages, you're constantly adapting and saying, okay, how am I going to shift my style to better complement this phase that I'm at?
Sure. Yeah, and I love what you mentioned about how colors and textures can really be a game changer. And I think, we don't necessarily think about it enough, how maybe there might be a difference between like a pink cotton shirt versus a satin pink shirt. Like just how it
Yeah.
feels different, how it moves different, and how it just, projects a different type of femininity. And just thinking about that and being aware of that in your closet or when you're shopping, I think can really make a difference. I know I've been paying more attention to it myself.
I
Yeah.
love that because I know you complimented the shirt and I'm like in love with the shirt today and it's like
Yeah.
silky. And I just found I'm like, when I'm wearing a shirt like that, it just feels like I have a different energy about how I feel
Yeah.
when I'm wearing this versus like a cotton t-shirt. And no
Yeah.
shade against the t-shirt, right? Like plenty of
Yeah.
people like to have a casual look, but
Yeah.
there is a power to kind of a feeling you get from wearing
Yeah.
certain clothing and fabrics
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, and not
Yeah.
underestimating that impact that it can have on you when you're in a
Yeah.
really insecure time.
I agree. My personal sort of feeling is that, for me it's the turban, but for you it can be anything else. It could be a really fun blouse. It could be a particular color of lipstick. But to me, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
treating something like a superhero cape. You just put it on and just like assume the power that comes with it, and then
I
just let
love
it take you
that.
away. So whatever your superhero cape is, I think, just embrace that. And I know we got a whole bunch of comments throughout, but I don't see any
Yeah.
additional questions. Um, and
I
we
was
have been
just,
chatting for a half an hour and the time has just flown
oh my
by.
gosh,
So
time flew by. Yeah, I guess
yeah,
I'm glad to stay on for a minute if there's any additional questions. But yeah, this has
yeah,
been awesome. And always feel free, to reach out to me. Sonia has a great
yeah,
resource as well, just in terms of styles and other resources that are out there. But I'm always glad to provide tips or insight or anything like that on my page. So please reach out anytime.
absolutely. Well,
Wonderful.
let's see. Okay, so I guess if anyone has any questions, you all can, like Anna said, reach out to us, DM us anytime. And
Mhm.
please sign up for, Anna's blog. She's always
Thank
churning out
you.
amazing content. We're also, always putting out hair self-care content. So visit our websites
Yes.
and definitely connect with us and connect with us here on Instagram. And this live will be posted to my page in case anyone wants to go back to it and revisit the good times. So
Awesome. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for joining us.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Good night,
All
Anna.
right. Good night.